This feels weird. There's a custom on Tisha B'Av to act like mourners and not to extend greetings to others. So it is very strange, and like everything in my body is resisting, but it's strange to open a Zoom and see your faces and not greet you. But please know that I'm so grateful to be with you here today, together today. While I'm talking, make yourselves comfortable however you can. Some of you may be fasting today. Others of you might be in the middle of your Thursday. So whatever feels right for you, I'm just going to talk for a bit, and I'm very, very glad for the company today. I'm Ariella Morkowitz, the founding director of SVIVAH, and there are beautiful new faces here today. Thank you for being here. 30 seconds about SVIVAH. SVIVAH is all about putting women at the center, discovering and exploring the unique and important Torah that comes from our lived experience. Our goal is always to learn with and from each other, and to do all of this within a very beautiful community of care. We define both Jewish and women very broadly. If you want to be with us, we want you with us and welcome. And we love that we are multi-generational and diverse in our backgrounds and affiliations, and we come together in celebration and support of women, our strengths, our unique perspectives, and our ways of impacting the world. Bitterly she weeps in the night, her cheek wet with tears. That's from Lamentations chapter 1, the second verse, the text that is customarily read on the night of Tisha B'Av. I heard this verse last night in my shul, and luckily the person who was reading the Megillah had a beautiful voice. And the tune for Eicha is a different one from the regular cantillation tune, and it's a hauntingly beautiful one. And because we use it just for Tisha B'Av, the audio memory for me is just a much stronger trigger, and it brings back to every Tisha B'Av that I've ever experienced, like just comes flashing by. And those of you who have been here before will not be surprised that I indeed found myself with my cheek wet with tears listening to the text being read. I just found the words of the Lamentations to be so evocative that I like couldn't help it. All the grief and loss that is obviously still hanging out with me just came right out. And it used to take me some work to get into the mindset of Tisha B'Av, but not anymore. Now it sometimes feels like the Tisha B'Av mindset is the constant instead of the, one day of the year that we save for our grief. I was talking with Jordan actually yesterday about the idea of collective catharsis, the idea that mourning and grieving together is actually such a beautiful way to move through grief. You don't have to be sad alone. You're sad together with everyone around you. You don't have to hold it in. You don't have to pretend to be okay. And I feel like that, unfortunately, over the last 3 years or so has been what SVIVAH has been. A lot of our gatherings have been a space to be in grief together. And that's also what Tisha B'Av is. It's a day on the Jewish calendar that's a container for all the pain of our history, a day to just wade into the grief and loss and suffering, all the sorrow of it. And today is the day when our cup gets to runneth over with tears. But we're not individually grieving. We're mourning together. Tisha B'Av gives us these customs to act like mourners, sitting low to the ground, not caring about what we wear or what we look like, fasting, depriving ourselves of the things that bring us joy. Tisha B'Av is that container for our grief. And for a minute, while listening to Eicha, listening to Lamentations, I was really overwhelmed by the intensity of the language of abandonment, of heartbreak and suffering, of the Jewish people feeling shunned and dismissed and belittled and threatened and afraid. I totally got sucked into it and like thought to myself, Tisha B'Av isn't a cute little sorrow container that's relegated to one day on the calendar. This is like every day, all the time. And why are we this people of loss and grief? Obviously, yes, parking lot. I still have a lot of my own loss and overwhelm to work out, obviously. But then later in the text, I heard the word for broken being read. And that word itself, it snapped me back to actually when Rabbanit Aliza taught us about the lessons of the brokenness of the matzah when she taught before Pesach. And that juxtaposition, the idea that like even on Pesach, on Passover, on our biggest day of freedom and celebration and peoplehood and springtime and new beginnings, we still have this element of brokenness. So it's not always just joy, and it's not always just brokenness and grief. The last line of the Book of Lamentations, renew our days as of old, is like, that was that reminder that I needed. Things are low, but they were not always low. We can and we will still return to those better times. So today is that day we can be broken, but we are not a people of grief, and we are not a broken people. And I needed that reminder, and I am going to deeply thank Rabbanit Aliza Sperling, our Director of Education, and Rabbanit Dalia Davis, our Director of Pastoral Education, for bringing us some of the Torah today that will keep our tears company. And thank you for all the ways that you hold us with your beautiful teaching. So thank you, Rabbanit Aliza.
Thank you so much, Ariella. It's really, I guess you shouldn't say a pleasure on Tisha B'Av, but it's really lovely to be with all of you today. And you see, I'm usually in Israel. I'm actually back in America now. That's why all the shelves behind me are empty, which I'm just noticing in the big screen right now. What I'd like to do today is to talk about Tisha B'Av a little bit, talk about one of the most classic stories that have to do with Tisha B'Av, and then think with you, and then Rabbanit Dalia is going to continue this about how Tisha B'Av is not only a day of mourning, but it's also a day of opportunity. So that's our goal today. And we're going to start by, I'm going to share my screen with you. And what I brought for you, are you able to see my screen? Can you just give me a thumbs up if you can see it? Great, thank you. Okay, so first of all, I wanted to introduce to you the Mishnah that talks about what happened on the ninth day of Av, right? Why is it that the ninth day of Av is a day of mourning? So the Mishnah says that on the ninth of Av, it was decreed upon our ancestors that they would all die in the wilderness and not enter the land of Israel. If you remember the story of the spies, and the people said that they don't want to enter the land of Israel, and then because they're too scared of the inhabitants of the land, and then God decrees upon them that generation is going to die in the wilderness. That was number one, the first thing that happened on this day. The temple was destroyed the first time in 586 BCE. The temple was destroyed the second time in 70 CE. Beitar was captured. Beitar was the Bar Kokhba revolt around the year 132, 135 CE, where it was kind of like the last revolt against the Romans, and it was put down brutally. And then the city of Jerusalem was plowed over by the Romans, so that it was no longer a Jewish city, and instead it became a Roman city named Aelia Capitolina. Not only does one fast on the ninth of Av, but from when the month of Av begins, one decreases acts of rejoicing. And that's where people who are Ashkenazim get the idea of the 9 days where they decrease acts of rejoicing. And Sephardim decrease certain acts of rejoicing on the week of Tisha B'Av. I also brought for you here, there's this idea that Tisha B'Av is not only a day where in ancient times bad things happened to the Jewish people, but also in modern days bad things happened. Of course, oh, here we go. Can you see me? Just give me, Ariel, yeah? Okay, so for instance, we have certain traditions. I don't know if it's exactly on the ninth day of Av, but it's around that time. You see over here in 1095, the First Crusade. the expulsion of Jews from England, the Inquisition. I heard that maybe it's not exactly on the 9th of Av. Um, the beginning of World War One, deportations from the Warsaw Ghetto, and the bombing in Buenos Aires, Argentina. So I think that was actually the 10th of Av. But all these things traditionally we say happened around that time. Okay, I'm going to stop my share and then start it again to make sure that you can all see my share. But what I guess I wanted to say here is that, yes, we have this tradition that all these terrible things happen to the Jewish people on the 9th of Av, but we also have a very Jewish attitude about it, which is that, oh yeah, the Second Temple was destroyed in 70 CE. That's not because the Roman Empire was trying to conquer the world and it was the most powerful empire in the world. No, the reason why these things happen is because of our own failings, the ways that we treat each other, the ways in which we create our society. And actually, I always thought that was kind of a myth, like to say, oh, all these bad things happen because of our own societal ills and the ways that we treat each other. Um, but then after October 7th, when so many people in Israel started to say, oh, the reason this happened is because we were so at odds with each other before October 7th, and our enemies saw an opportunity. And it made me think that maybe this is not just a kind of a Jewish fable that bad things happen to us because of our own ways that we treat each other, but that's actually, besides being spiritually true, it's actually true, right? That the ways in which we treat each other really can bring these terrible things on ourselves. So I want to look at some sources with you, and let me just get us back to my source sheet. 1 minute. Here we go. Okay, so we are going to look at the most, iconic story of Tisha B'Av in the classical sources in the Talmud, and that is the story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa and the party that went terribly wrong. And I'm going to read it to you first from the Talmud. And as we are looking through this story, I would love for you, please, to write in the chat, what are the reasons for the destruction here? Or what are some of the social ills or the mistakes or the things that you see in the story that feel wrong? And if you, as we are reading this story together, if you could please put that into the chat. Okay, so I'm going to read it in English. We are going to read this story first, the story from the Talmud, and then we are going to read another story from the Midrash, and we are going to kind of contrast the ways that they tell the story. Okay, so Rabbi Yochanan said, "What is the meaning of that which is written? Happy is the man who fears always, but he who hardens his heart shall fall into mischief." Jerusalem was destroyed on account of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. And then it's going to give us two other stories, a story about a rooster and a hen, and a story about a shaft from a chariot, which unfortunately we don't have time to read right now. Jerusalem was destroyed on account of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. This, as there was a certain man whose friend was named Kamsa, and whose enemy was named Bar Kamsa. Okay? This man once made a large feast and said to his servant, "Go bring me my friend Kamsa." The servant went and mistakenly brought him his enemy, Bar Kamsa. Okay, so it was a mistake because the servant, probably unwittingly, brings the wrong man to the party. So instead of bringing the friend, he brings the enemy. The servant went and mistakenly brought him his enemy, Bar Kamsa. The man who was hosting the feast came and found Bar Kamsa sitting at the feast. The host said to Bar Kamsa, "That man is the enemy, the Baal Devava of that man." In other words, he said, "You are my enemy. What are you doing here? Arise and leave." Bar Kamsa said to him, "Since I have already come, let me stay and I'll give you the money for whatever I eat and drink. Just don't embarrass me by sending me out." The host said to him, "No, you must leave." Bar Kamsa said to him, "I will give you money for half the feast. Just do not send me away." The host said to him, "No, you must leave." Bar Kamsa said to him, "I will give you money for the entire feast. Just let me stay. Right? I'll pay for the whole party. Just let me stay." The host said to him, "No, you must leave." Finally, the host took Bar Kamsa by his hand, stood him up, and took him out. So that's scene one. Okay, scene one is the party. But now Bar Kamsa starts to think, okay, how am I going to respond to what happened to me? Okay, so before we go on in the story, who is Kamsa and who is Bar Kamsa? And I'm also going to ask you, as we are now back in the main Zoom, if you could put in the chat, what are the things that you're noticing in the story, right? What are the things that are wrong with society here? What are the wrong things that are wrong with the interpersonal relationships? What's happening here? Okay. So, who is what Kamsa? Who's Bar Kamsa? I saw a few answers to this. I saw one theory that maybe Bar Kamsa was a leader of the Zealots, somebody who was very against the Jews making peace with the Romans. But I also saw another answer, which is that Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, Bar means son. So I saw that the commentary, the Maharsha, says that maybe Bar Kamsa was actually the son of Kamsa. So you have the host who's great friends with Kamsa, and he is enemies with his friend's son, Bar Kamsa. And maybe that's the reason that that Bar Kamsa actually comes to the party, because he says, "Oh, I know the host is friends with my father. Maybe the reason he's inviting me is because he wants to make peace with me, because he's friends with my father. So maybe now he wants to make peace with me." And so maybe that's part of what's happening in the story, according to the Maharsha. Okay, so I'd love to read and see. Um, Okay, what are some of the problems that are happening here? So let me see what you wrote. It shows how even a small, insignificant mistake, when it's handled humanly, can lead to terrible consequences. All right, no one intervened who attended the party, right? Uh, yes, so right, that Bar Kamsa is the son of Kamsa. We are instructed to never embarrass another person, right? Maybe Bar Kamsa should have just been a mensch and left on his own accord. Inflexibility, obstinate, not listening. Okay, so what is going on here? What does the name Kamsa mean? That's interesting. It would have been difficult, but the host could have let Bar Kamsa stay and could have resulted in some good and some healing. An attempt to buy one's way into a place where we are not wanted, right? We don't know any background about Bar Kamsa. We don't know if he's a terrible guy. The host, just to give a little bit of love to the host here, the host has made a party and has worked very, very hard on it. Who knows what the history is between the host and Bar Kamsa? So is it really true that just because Bar Kamsa says, "Please don't send me out," that he should keep him there? All right, I see a very poignant text here. I've met people who treat me like Bar Kamsa, right? How terrible is that? There's another story that I'm just looking at my time. I see I don't have that much time left, so I'm going to go back to my document. Okay, so after having been cast out from the feast, Bar Kamsa said to himself, "Since the sages were sitting there and did not protest the actions of the host, although they saw how he humiliated me, learn from it that they were content with what he did." Right? Since the sages were at the party, nobody did anything to help me, so they must be on the side of the host. I will therefore go and inform against them to the king. And so Bar Kamsa goes to the king and he informs against the people. And basically what he does is he has the Romans send an animal to be sacrificed in the temple. He makes a little blemish on that animal that Jews consider to be a blemish, but Romans do not. And then and then and then the rabbis have to decide whether they should bring this blemished animal as a sacrifice, because they know that if the Romans find out they didn't bring it, they'll think that the Jews are conspiring to revolt against them. And so there will be consequences. But there's this Rabbi Zachariah ben Avkulos, who says, no, we can't bring a blemished animal. The Torah says that you can't bring a blemished animal. So no matter what the consequences are, we can't bring the blemished animal. So then the sages think, well, maybe we'll just kill the Roman messenger. And Rabbi Zachariah says, no, if you kill him, people will say that one who makes a blemish on sacrificial animals is to be killed. So, so they don't do that. I am going to skip very quickly ahead to this other story in Echa Rabbah that tells the same story from a different perspective. And in this story, Rabbi Zachariah ben Avkulos is not one of the sages who decides not to bring the sacrifice. Instead, he's the sage who doesn't stand up for Bar Kamsa. So we'll just read the beginning of it. There was an incident involving a certain man in Jerusalem who made a feast. Okay, so this is the same story, but it's told in a different source. It's one of the oldest midrashic works. He said to a member of his household, "Go and bring me my friend Kamsa." So the messenger went and brought his enemy, Bar Kamsa. In some versions of this story, in the Cairo Geniza version, it's not Bar Kamsa. His name is actually Bar Kamtsura. He entered and sat among the guests. The host entered and found him among those invited to the feast. He said to him, "You are my enemy and you're sitting in my house," right? It's the same story. "Get up and leave my house." He said, "Don't shame me. I'll give you the cost of my meal." He said, "You will not recline at the feast." He said to him, "Do not shame me and I will sit, but I will not eat and I will not drink." He said to him, "You will not recline at the feast." He said to him, "Do not shame me and I will give you the cost of this entire feast." He said to him, "Get up and leave." Rabbi Zachariah ben Avkulos was there, and it was within his ability to protest, but he did not protest. So in this version of the story, Rabbi Zachariah ben Avkulos is the sage who's actually at the party and doesn't protest when things happen. And notice how there are all these circles of responsibility and circles of social dynamics that's going on here, right? Initially, this is just a story about the host and Bar Kamsa, okay? And maybe, if it's true that Kamsa is the father, then we could also wonder, what's Kamsa doing here, right? Like, why is the father not intervening? Presumably, maybe he's at the feast. Right. And so first it's just a story of these people, and then it just balloons, right? Oh, the rabbis were there. They didn't do anything. Or Zachariah ben Avkulos was there. He didn't do anything. And then he says, okay, I'm going to get the Roman authorities involved, right? And then all the sages are involved because this becomes a legal discussion. And something that was just a story between two people becomes a story about how the entire temple was destroyed, because the Romans respond to this and come and think that the Jews are revolting against them and come and attack them. So so what I want to say, but first I just want to be able to see everybody's faces. Okay, great. So what I'm wondering from you, and you can put this in the chat, is why is this our story of why the temple was destroyed? What are the things that the rabbis are trying to communicate to us about the world that we live in, the world that we used to live in, and the world that we live in now? What are the pain points in this story, right? That were painful then and are painful now. And I know that Rabbanit Dalia is going to talk with you some more about those pain points. But please put that in the chat. What are those pain points that caused the destruction of the temple? And I'm going to take 2 more minutes and say that Rabbanit Dalia is going to talk about some of the opportunities in this story. But I also want to mention that 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 having a day like Tisha B'Av, a day when the walls come down, right? A day when the temple is destroyed, I think is of course terrible and is also an opportunity. You know how we say, I was trying to remember before, I'm such a Jew. You're like, I don't remember if it's lobsters or crabs, but like when you put them in the water and you boil the water and you turn it on and they don't know to leap out of the water because the water is just getting hotter and hotter and hotter until they just get cooked, right? That sometimes we live in societies where the water is just getting hotter and hotter and hotter, but we don't realize because it's all kind of a gradual process, right? It's a process where things are just getting worse and worse. The ways that we treat each other are just getting worse and worse and worse. And we don't notice because that's just the way things are. And it's so incremental, the way that it just gets worse and worse and worse. And I think that that could be what could have happened. In other words, the Kamsa and Bar Kamsa story could have just been another story in a world in which people hate each other and people embarrass each other, and that's the way things go. But we decided, our tradition decided that that wasn't just going to be a story about the way the water got hotter. It was going to be a story about how, no, that's it, that's the end, right? This causes the walls to come down. And I think that's a really important point to have a day in which we say, no, we're not going to stand for things just getting worse and worse and worse. We're going to take a stand and say, things like this cause destruction. It's not like we can just allow it to continue. Sometimes we just have to let the walls fall and start to think about how we would rebuild, right? Because we're not just going to allow it for our world to progress in that way. Um, and for those of you who have read the wonderful book called something like "This is Real and You Are Not Prepared" about preparing for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, you know that he starts the story of the high holidays at Tisha B'Av, because the first thing that needs to happen is for the walls to come down, to look around and say, yeah, these are ruins, right? It's not just the world getting like incrementally wrong. No, the walls have come down and we need to rebuild them. So I'm going to turn it over to Rabbanit Dalia because I've given her the hard part about helping us try to think about how to rebuild the walls.
Thank you so much, Rabbanit Aliza. I want to really start with one of the things you said at the very beginning, the idea that Tisha B'Av is a day of opportunity. And when I think about the story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, and I was just reading the incredible amount of wisdom flowing through the chat, it's so helpful to take a step back and look at a story from 2,000 years ago and consider what is wrong. And we can just see it like leaping out of the page. And it seems so obvious. And I wonder, when I think about that and the way that you unpacked the story for us and went to so many deep elements of it, if the people in the moment who were living there could see it, or if it's just so much clearer to us in hindsight as we reflect back. And that made me think about today, right? If we were the page of Talmud and somebody 2,000 years later is reading our story, when they look at it, what are they going to say? Oh, it's so obvious. Just do this one thing. This is the problem. Look, it's right here. We can all see it. Why can't you see it? And so I want to kind of reopen a piece that Rabbanit Aliza asked us about and kind of have us put it in the chat in a way that it's actually going to become a SVIVAH kina. A kina is a special prayer of lamentation that many people like to recite on Tisha B'Av. And so I'm going to give you a specific prompt, and then I'm going to invite you to respond to that in the chat. If you've already kind of answered that and you want to say what you said before again, it bears repeating. The wisdom here is just overflowing. And then we're very blessed to have Rabba Wendy Amsellem here, who's going to actually chant it as a kina, as a prayer of lamentation. So the prompt I'm going to offer you is, if somebody was looking at our society 2,000 years later, what is the problem that they would see? And as you're answering that, I invite you to do as you've been already doing, not to name any particular names or see anything particularly political, but kind of see these broad strokes of the things that you're seeing. I've seen a lot of beautiful things, including bystanderness, embarrassing people, inability to communicate, anything like that, any problems that you think people would see. Okay, so I invite you to put them in the chat, and Rabbanit Rabba Wendy, when you see them start to flow, feel free to come off mute, or maybe we can spotlight you also, and then you can chant them as they flow.
Okay, I'll try. We'll see how it works.
Thank you.
Jews not supporting their own people, wanton violence, lack of critical thinking, seeing every stranger as the enemy, placing ideology ahead of compassion, black and white thinking, certainty that one is right and othering, environmental destruction and hatred, intolerance, division, and exploitation. Human nature has not changed. Dehumanization of others, especially those who hold different views or values than we. We can't talk to each other. People refusing to see the humanity in each other, lack of empathy and perspective taking, greed and self-interest, lack of compassion for others' situation, lack of compassion for others, people and animals, betrayal of our own truths and our own hearts, missing relationships, too few listening hearts looking down, not out, abuse of ourselves and others through unattended ignorance, people wanting easy answers rather than using more difficult logical solutions, having lost the ability to listen, leaders driven by ego. Our well-being is intrinsically connected to the well-being of every other being in the world.
Are you there?
Jews giving over themselves for power or access, not holding Mother Earth, the mother sacred and holy, seeing the other as the enemy, lack of grounding, fighting amongst ourselves when we are vulnerable to enemies outside, people who see others as expendable, forgetting that we are each responsible for one another, demonizing those who disagree, not caring about others as much as themselves, and seeing the world in a way that makes life easier instead of how it is, inability to speak to those who are different, erosion of our ability to listen to each other, lack of understanding, loneliness, social media, humans forgetting our humanness. All of us who sit at the feast have a responsibility to do the right thing. Disparaging empathy as weakness instead of strength, lack of compassion.
Thank you, Rabba Wendy. That is an incredibly powerful kina that everyone just created together. And what I notice about this piece is that it is something that really includes our whole society, and that really reflects on the challenges that we're facing in this moment. And maybe if we don't spend the next 2,000 years ignoring what's going on, but we actually look at it as we're doing right now and try to reflect on what's wrong, we can start to build some change. And we can go from a time of mourning to a time of nechama, of comfort. And so another piece of this, in addition to kind of looking at the big problems, is also to kind of reflect internally about each of our personal roles in society and in what we can think about as the challenges that we're a part of and the solutions that we can be a part of. And somebody wrote earlier, and Rabbanit Aliza mentioned it, that they felt like they've experienced what Bar Kamsa experienced. So I want us to dive in for a minute and do a bit of empathic interpretation from this story. And what I'm going to invite us to do is we're going to have a slideshow of 4 different questions. And they're going to invite you to kind of think about how you might have been in these roles of the people in the story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, and how it's felt for you. And you can, if you have a piece of paper and you want to journal, feel free to do that. If you just want to think about it in your mind, if you want to journal on the chat as we go, you're welcome to do that. And part of why I was thinking we can have this experience of this empathic interpretation is because I think all of these roles, when we look at them from afar, seem so distant and like, who behaves that way? How could anybody do that? But then when we step into it and really place ourselves within the story, this is such a normal part of life, right? There's these moments where we make mistakes and where we do something that can hurt someone else. And we also have these moments where we ourselves get hurt by the mistakes of others. So let's dive in and reflect. So Jordan, if you're able to share the slideshow, thank you so much. So we'll start with the servant. So you can just think for yourself, or you can write if you'd like. I can empathize with the servant, right? The servant was the one who brought Bar Kamsa instead of bringing Kamsa to the feast. For I too have. Okay, now let's go to the next one. Okay, I can empathize with the host, for I too have. Okay, and let's go to the next one. I can empathize with Bar Kamsa, for I too have. Let's do one more. I can empathize with the rabbis, right? The rabbis were at the party. What did they choose to do in that moment? For I too have. Okay. Thank you, Jordan. We can take the slideshow down. And thank you, everybody who's been reflecting in the chat. And I think, throughout the course of the day, I invite you to continue to think about these characters in the story and wonder, like, how have we been in each of these roles? And how is this just such a human experience that we can all go through at different times, and that actually can have such huge ramifications as we're seeing in the story. So now what we want to do, though, is not just stay in this place of thinking about the hardship and what's wrong, but we really want to go to a place of nechama, of comfort. We're getting very close to the midpoint of the day, which is called chatzot, the middle of the day. And I know people are in different time zones, so some people might have already passed it. Some people, you might not be there yet. But it's a time of day where the day of Tisha B'Av, the morning, starts to switch and become a slowly, step by step, going towards a place of greater comfort until we hit the Shabbat, where Shabbat is called Shabbat Nacham, or Shabbat of comfort. And I think part of the way that we get from a place of mourning to a place of comfort is by figuring out within ourselves what actions we can do that can take us from a place of hatred, of anger, of negativity within society to places of greater love and welcoming and compassion. So I want to invite us the opportunity to reflect on a question that we're going to actually have an opportunity to talk to each other about, and really just to respond to a prompt, which is, if only I blank, then blank. If only I do something, what is the action that I could do? Then what could be the outcome of that? And as you're thinking about that question, you can think about it in a very practical way, right? If only I invite somebody over, then that person won't feel so lonely. And if you want, because what we're going to do is called a dreaming circle, you can dream really big. You can say, if only I become the president of whatever place, I won't say any places, if I become the leader of this country, then everything will be beautiful and peaceful. You can answer it however you like. Okay, so feel free to dream in whatever way you like. And what we're going to do is go into breakout rooms for a few minutes and just kind of go around our breakout room circles. And anyone who feels comfortable, I invite you to share your answer to that question. If only I, then blank. Okay, so we're going to get randomly sent into our breakout rooms. So you'll see something pop up, And if you have any trouble, don't worry. You can just stay in the main room and Jordan will be with you here. So don't worry about the tech. If it works for you to go in, then you should see something pop up and tell me when it's there. And then we're going to
back
come
together.
back together. Yes, then we'll come back together to close. Yes, absolutely. So just go for a few minutes and then we'll come back. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for going to those breakout rooms and for sharing and for listening and for being together in smaller groups. I love when we have the opportunity to kind of interact in a more intimate way. So I appreciate you doing that with us. So to close, we're going to write another song. This one is not going to be a lamentation. This one is going to be a song of comfort. And I'm going to invite you to, again, put into the chat a prompt, and then we'll have Rabba Wendy sing us out. So the prompt for this moment is very simple. It's just, I can. And then if you can fill in after that something that you can do that will bring us closer to a place of comfort, of healing, of positive environment and energy and peace and beauty and all the positive things we want to see in the world. So what is something small that you can do? I can. Okay, so populate the chat, fill those in. And Rabba Wendy, when you're ready, we'd love if you can sing us out. Oh,
I can keep choosing to open my heart to acts of loving kindness. I can be kind to those around me. I can forgive more freely. I can make space for others. Be grateful for all my blessings. Learn to see things differently. I can offer hugs. I can reach out from a place of love. Listen to others and try to forgive myself. Walk through the world with love first. Be more grateful. Try to understand others' perspectives. Continue to learn and grow. Connect with compassion. Feel God's presence here and now. I can remember all the good. Admit when I'm wrong and make amends. Send blessings to those I care for and those with whom I have trouble. I can see and be the goodness in the world. I can believe in a beautiful future. Reach out to my kids with love instead of criticism and refuse to hate. I can take a moment before I speak and speak with kindness. Listen more. Be determined and gentle. I can be more gentle with myself. I can help heal the world by offering compassion, supporting wildlife and biodiversity. I can honor the importance of solitude, enjoy my family and suspend judgment. I can grow curiosity, still help people along with myself. I can remember that others are feeling the same. I'm not alone in my pain, and I can reach out. I can listen with compassion and empathy, hold space for everyone. I can recognize the good in the world and break free from the cycle of emotional dysregulation.
thank you so much, Rabba Wendy. The tune that she just used was called Elitzion, and it's one of the most famous songs for keynote for Lamentations, and it's this beautiful tune, and I've heard it, I heard it a few hours ago, but I will never hear it again the same way as I just heard it now. This was so special. Thank you for doing that for us. And thank you, everybody, for the beautiful words that you just placed into this chat and created the song. And these are the words that I'm going to hold in my heart as I go through the next few hours, through the rest of Tisha B'Av, and heading into hopefully a better place of Shabbat Nachamu, and heading into next week, where we hope to gather again with all of you and to see you again back in SVIVAH and back on our Zoom for a very special program. It will be on July 28th from 8 to 9:30. And this is a program for a happy day, Tu B'Av, the 15th of the month of Av, which is a day where we celebrate love on the Jewish calendar, all kinds of different love, romantic, friendship, love of ideas, love of people. So come be with us and we'll celebrate together. First, I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. A huge thank you to Rabba Wendy, Rabbanit Aliza, to Jordan, to Ariella. Thank you so much for everything you did to make this program possible and allow us to be together on Tisha B'Av. It has made my Tisha B'Av so much more meaningful to be with all of you.